Imagine losing the love of your life, 50 years gone in an instant. But what if that was just the beginning? What if everything you thought you knew was a lie? For Eleanor, a quiet life in Savannah took a turn she never saw coming. Unaware of their 100 billion inheritance, their uncles threw them out after their billionaire dad died. They were thrown out with nothing, no home, no money, no one to fight for them. 4 brothers betrayed by their own family after their billionaire father died. But what their greedy uncles didn't know, those boys were carrying a secret. $100 billion secret their father hid away, a legacy that could only be unlocked if they stood together. The sky wept with them. It was the kind of cold, stubborn rain that seemed to ignore umbrellas soaking through clothes and chilling bones. Hundreds gathered at the hillside cemetery, all dressed in black as the casket of Ezekiel Carter, a man who once stood as a pillar of hope in the community, was slowly lowered into the earth. He wasn't just a billionaire, he was their billionaire. Ezekiel Carter had built schools, funded hospitals, and given second chances to people who were written off by society. His face was as familiar in the poorest neighborhoods as it was in business magazines. And yet on this day, as his family stood at his graveside, none of that power seemed to matter. His wife, Naomi Carter, stood frozen beside the casket. Her fingers were tightly intertwined with those of her oldest son, Malik, 14. Beside Malik stood Zion, 12, his face down, blinking back tears. Cairo quietly sobbed, burying his face into Naomi's side. Little Micah, 5, clung to Malik's leg, confused by the somber faces, his young mind unable to grasp that his father was never coming back. All 4 boys were dressed in simple black suits that felt far too big for their small frames. They looked lost like tiny islands in a sea of mourners. As the final shovel of dirt hit the casket, 2 sharply dressed men approached. Jeremiah and Calvin Carter, Ezekiel's brothers, wore expressions of forced grief. Their expensive suits were crisp, their shoes unscathed by the mud. But their eyes were cold, calculating. Necum, Jeremiah murmured, placing a hand on her shoulder as if comforting her. We need to talk now. Before she could respond, the uncle subtly guided her away from her sons behind the large marble mausoleum where no one could hear. Naomi, listen, Calvin began, his tone falsely gentle. Ezekiel left behind. Complications. Naomi frowned. What complications? Jeremiah exhaled dramatically, pulling out a neatly folded document. Massive debts, unpaid loans, failed investments. The media doesn't know yet. For the sake of Ezekiel's name, we've handled the legal work. But everything's gone. The mansion, the businesses, the accounts. It's all seized. Naomi's lips parted, stunned. That's impossible. Ezekiel told me he told you what a wife wants to hear. But the truth is ugly. We need to act fast before the media smells blood. For your sake, Naomi, and for the boys, you should leave quietly tonight. Naomi's world tilted. Her heart pounded. You want me to just leave? Where are we supposed to go? Jeremiah's expression didn't flinch. That's not our problem anymore. Naomi's breath caught. Tears blurred her vision as she looked back toward her sons, still huddled near the casket. The image of Malik holding Micah, trying so hard to stay strong, was a gut punch. By the time the family returned to the mansion that evening, the nightmare had escalated. 2 moving vans were already in the driveway. Strangers in uniforms rifled through their belongings, tossing them into black garbage bags with zero care. Naomi's protests were ignored. When Malik tried to stop a man from throwing away a photo of their family, he was shoved aside. Orders from Mr. Carter, the security guard said coldly. Jeremiah and Calvin stood at the mansion's front door, watching as their nephews' lives were torn apart, their faces masks of faux sympathy. You have until nightfall, Calvin said simply. The press will be here in the morning. You don't want the boys to witness that mess, do you? With nowhere to go, Naomi gathered what she could. A duffel bag, a few clothes. Cairo insisted on carrying a cracked photo frame of their father. Micah clutched his worn-out toy truck, unaware that this was the last time he'd see the home he was born in. As the rain poured, Naomi and her 4 sons were pushed out through the grand iron gates. The mansion, once filled with laughter, music, and warmth, now stood cold and hollow behind them. The world didn't stop to notice 4 children standing in the rain with nothing but a few bags and broken hearts. But Malik noticed Micah shivering beside him. Zion noticed the way Naomi's hand trembled as she wiped her tears. Cairo noticed how Malik's lips pressed into a firm line as if making a silent promise. No one was coming to save them. They had only each other. And somewhere deep inside Malik's heart, a spark ignited. We're Carters. We don't get thrown out. We rise. Little did they know, they were still the rightful heirs to a 100 billion legacy. The world had just underestimated the wrong family. The city lights had never looked colder. Naomi Carter walked down the cracked sidewalk, clutching her son's clothes as if her grip alone could shield them from the biting night air. Their mansion had been reduced to a distant silhouette, its grandeur now just a cruel memory. She had no plan, no car, no money, only 4 boys, a worn duffel bag, and the crushing weight of betrayal. Mommy, where are we going? Micah 5 asked softly, his small fingers tangled in the hem of her coat. Naomi glanced down at him, offering a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Somewhere safe, baby. Her heart was in shambles, but she couldn't afford to break. Not now, not with her boys looking up to her. As they turned a corner, a flicker of familiarity pierced through the fog of despair. A small rusted sign hung above a boarded-up building. Carter Community Center, built with love. It was Ezekiel's first project. Long before the billions, before the boardrooms and spotlights, he had poured his sweat into these walls brick by brick. Naomi paused, staring at the faded mural of Ezekiel smiling, his arm draped around a group of neighborhood kids. His eyes seemed to look right at her. "This is it," she whispered. Malik, 14, stepped forward, inspecting the chain on the side door. A few firm tugs, a loud clink, the lock gave way. "Come on," Malik said, ushering his mother and brothers inside. The air was stale, the floor dusty. The only light came from the soft glow of the street lamp outside. But to them it felt like sanctuary, at least for tonight. They settled into a corner of the main hall, Micah curled up in Nakomi's lap. Zion sat cross-legged, his eyes distant. Cairo placed the cracked family photo between them, as if to anchor them to something still whole. The silence grew heavy, pressing on Nakomi's chest. "I failed you," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "No, you didn't," Malik said, his tone firmer than a 14-year-old should ever be. She looked at him, surprised by the steel in his eyes. "We're not done," he continued. "Dad wouldn't want us to act like we're done." Nakomic's lips quivered. "Malik, you're just a boy. This isn't your fight." "I'm his son," Malik said, his jaw tightening. "And they messed with the wrong family." His words didn't come from a place of bravado. They came from a place of survival. The kind of survival where a boy realizes he's now the man of the house because no one else is stepping up. Zion looked up, but how they took everything. Naomi closed her eyes. Ezekiel's final words echoing in her mind. "The boys will find the 4 pillars, keep them together." She had brushed it off as metaphorical back then, a poetic way of telling her to nurture their bond. But now, as she sat on a cold concrete floor, it didn't feel so abstract anymore. "Before he died," Naomi began slowly, "your father said something strange. He told me, the boys will find the 4 pillars. Malik furrowed his brow. "What's that supposed to mean?" Naomi shook her head. "I don't know. But I do know. Your father never said things by accident. If he mentioned it, it's a clue." Cairo's eyes lit up. "Maybe it's like a treasure hunt. Maybe Dad left her something." Micah perked up at the word treasure, his little hands clutching his toy truck. Malik didn't smile. He wasn't in the mood for fairy tales. But somewhere deep inside, the possibility sparked a flicker of hope. "What if it's real?" Zion whispered. "What if that's why they threw us out? Because they don't want us to find it." The idea hung in the air, heavy with possibility. Malik stood up, his silhouette framed against the dim light. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Then we find it," he declared, "all of us together." Nakomi's eyes filled with tears. Not of sorrow this time, but of something fiercer, pride. Ezekiel was gone. The world had turned its back on them. But her sons, her boys, were still standing. She reached out, pulling them into a tight embrace. The 5 of them, huddled together in that dusty old community hall, became an unbreakable circle. In that moment, Malik's voice cut through the quiet. "From now on, we move as one no matter what." None of them knew what the 4 pillars were. But one thing was certain, they weren't victims anymore. The Carter brothers had a legacy to reclaim, and the world had just made the mistake of underestimating 4 black boys with nothing left to lose. The sun hadn't even risen when Zion woke to the sound of soft whispers in the dim haze of early morning. He saw Malik sitting near the broken window, his knees pulled to his chest, staring out at the empty street. Cairo and Micah were still asleep, curled up beside Naomi, whose protective embrace hadn't loosened all night. Zion sat up quietly, scanning the dusty shelves lining the community center walls among the clutter of forgotten trophies and faded photographs. Something caught his eye, wedged awkwardly between a broken basketball hoop and an old shoebox. A leather-bound journals. The cover was worn, its edges frayed, but Zion recognized it instantly. Dad's journal. Ezekiel had always carried it, scribbling thoughts, sketches, and quotes as if he were building some private map of the world. It was never meant for business. It was personal. Zion's hands trembled as he pulled it free. Flipping it open, he saw familiar handwriting, but something was different. The pages weren't filled with stories or speeches. Instead, they were littered with numbers, symbols, and diagrams. At first glance, it looked like gibberish, but then, tucked between 2 pages, a folded piece of paper slipped out. In his father's unmistakable bold handwriting with the words, "The 4 pillars protect our true legacy. When the world turns its back, follow the keys only your hearts can unlock." Zin's pulse quickened. "Malik," he whispered. Malik turned, his exhaustion giving way to curiosity as Zion handed him the journal. "What is this?" Malik asked, flipping through the coded pages. "I think it's the 4 pillars Dad talked about." Zion said, "Look, maps, symbols, locations. It's like clues." Malik's jaw clenched. "You think this is why they threw us out? Because they knew Dad left something?" Zion nodded. "They don't want us to find it." Cairo stirred awake, rubbing his eyes. "Find what?" Malik passed him the journal. "A legacy Dad didn't trust them with." Micah, still half asleep, crawled over and rested his head on Malik's lap. Is it treasure, Malik? Malik smiled softly. Better than treasure, little man. It's everything they said we don't have. The journal wasn't just a notebook. It was a lifeline. Ezekiel hadn't trusted lawyers or bank vaults. He had trusted them, his sons, to protect what truly mattered. Meanwhile, in a high-rise office overlooking the city, Jeremiah and Calvin Carter paced impatiently. The boys are still out there, Calvin said, slamming a folder onto the glass desk. And Naomi is too smart to stay quiet for long. Jeremiah adjusted his cufflinks, his expression cold. We underestimated Ezekiel. That man always had a backup plan. If those brats find it, we're done. He pressed a button on his phone. Get me Victor Kane. I want eyes on those boys. Find them. Follow them. If they sneeze, I want to know. And if they get too close. He let the implication hang in the air. Victor Kane was not a man who asked questions. Back at the community center, the boys huddled around the journal as Naomi made instant oatmeal on a small camping stove someone had left behind. The four pillars aren't just places, Zion mused. They're vaults, look here. Liberty, strength, honor, unity, they're like the core values Dad always talked about. Malik's eyes sharpened. You're saying Dad hid something in 4 places, each representing a pillar. Exactly, Zion said. But it's more than that. These locations are connected like a chain. We find one, it'll lead to the next. Malik stood, a fire igniting in his chest. Then we start today. Naomi placed a hand on his arm. Malik, we need a plan. They're going to come after you now. They'll play dirty. Malik met her gaze, the weight of his father's legacy pressing down on his young shoulders. Then let them come. Mom, we'll be ready. For the first time since Ezekiel's death, Naomi saw her husband's fire burning in her sons. It wasn't born from anger. It was born from purpose. The Carter boys weren't just going to survive. They were going to take back everything. What they didn't know was that their every move was already being watched. Victor Kane's men had spotted them. The chase for the 4 pillars had begun. The city had a way of swallowing noise, but this morning felt eerily silent. Naomi walked slightly behind her sons as they made their way through the back streets, staying clear of busy intersections. The journal had led them to an unlikely destination, Harbor Trust Bank, a small crumbling branch on the edge of the industrial district. It wasn't flashy, no glass towers, no marble floors, but Ezekiel Carter never trusted appearances. The boys stood in front of the rusted banks, their reflection blurred in the dusty glass. Malik exchanged a glance with Zion, his silent way of saying, "You ready?" They pushed open the doors. Inside, the air was thick with neglect. A lone ceiling fan turned lazily, squeaking with each rotation. Old posters about savings accounts and college funds peeled off the walls. But at the back of the bank, tucked behind a discreet corridor, was a row of safety deposit boxes. It didn't look like the start of a billion-dollar inheritance. It looked like a place forgotten by the world. Malik reached into his pocket and unfolded the latest page from Ezekiel's journal. A sketch diagram indicated box 117 marked with a star and a cryptic note. When the world searches your pockets, they'll never search your heart. Zian's eyes widened. Wait, Maya's truck? Micah blinked, confused. What about my truck? Malik knelt beside him, carefully examining the old toy that had rarely left Maya's side. His fingers traced over the chipped paint until he noticed something odd. A tiny slit beneath the truck bed. With a soft click, a hidden compartment slid open. Inside was a small brass key engraved with the number 117. Maya's face lit up. Dad hid a key in my truck. Malik smiled. Guess you were carrying a treasure all along, little man. The key fit perfectly into box 117. For a moment, no one breathed. Malik turned it slowly and the lock gave a satisfying click. Inside was a sleek black envelope sealed with Ezekiel's personal wax stamp, a symbol of 4 interlocking circles. Naomi's hand covered her mouth. Malik opened the envelope. A small flash drive slid into his palm along with a folded sheet of parchment that simply read, "This is the beginning. Protect each other." Zion spotted an old desktop computer in the corner of the bank. Miraculously still plugged in, the screen flickered to life as Malik inserted the drive. For a moment, there was only static. Then Ezekiel's face appeared on screen. He wasn't in a suit. He wasn't addressing shareholders or politicians. He was wearing a simple hoodie, sitting in what looked like his home study. His eyes softened when he began to speak. If you're seeing this, my sons, it means the world's taken a shot at you. Maybe they threw you out. Maybe they told you you're not worthy. But listen to me. We don't build our legacy on what they give us. We build it on what they can't take. And the one thing they'll never own is our unity. The 4 pillars aren't about money. They're about strength, honor, liberty, and family. Together, they protect a trust that no greedy hand can touch. Naomi wiped away silent tears, her fingers trembling. Ezekiel leaned closer in the video. You'll hear a lot of voices, boys. Voices telling you to fight alone. Don't. Your true wealth isn't in bank accounts. It's in each other. As long as you stand together, you'll unlock everything this world tried to steal. As the video faded to black, a map appeared on the screen detailing 3 marked locations across the city. The remaining pillars. Underneath the map, a message flashed. The next step will test your unity. Trust your bond. For a long moment no one spoke. It wasn't about money anymore. It wasn't even about revenge. Ezekiel had entrusted his legacy not to lawyers, not to corporations, but to 4 boys, barely old enough to be taken seriously. But Malik understood now. It wasn't about being taken seriously. It was about being unbreakable. He looked at his brothers, his voice firm. We don't stop. Not until we find them all. Kai nodded eagerly, like a real-life scavenger hunt. Zian's gaze sharpened. But it's not just a hunt. The uncles are going to come harder now. They'll know we're getting close. Naomi stood, her posture regaining strength. Then we stay ahead of them. We move smart. We move as Carters. Little Micah looked up at his brothers, clutching his truck tightly. I'm part of this too, right? Malik crouched to his level, ruffling his hair. You're our lucky key, buddy. We're not going anywhere without you. As they left the Randon bank, none of them noticed the shadowy figure watching from across the street. Speaking into a phone, they found the first one. The voice reported Victor Kane's operation was officially in motion. But the Carter brothers were just getting started. The city didn't feel safe anymore. Every alley whispered of danger. Every car that slowed made Malik's pulse quicken. But they had no choice. Their father's journal had led them here, an old public records building, forgotten by the city, but alive in their father's coded map. The boys moved together, close, silent, slipping through a rusted side door. The inside was colder than outside, filled with the scent of paper, dust and time. Rows of filing cabinets stretched out like a maze. The place was empty, or so they thought. We are close, Zion whispered, eyes darting to a corner of the map. Beneath the old archive room was their target. The second pillar. Malik felt it in his gut. Something wasn't right. Outside, engines purred to a stop. Black SUVs tinted windows. 2 men emerged, dressed in dark coats, moving with military precision. The uncles had sent their wolves. Inside, the boys reached the archive room just as a loud crash echoed behind them. The back door slammed open. Footsteps pounded in. There they are. A voice barked sharp and cold. Malik didn't hesitate. Run. He grabbed Maya's small hand and pulled him into the labyrinth of shelves. Zion and Cairo followed, hearts hammering in their chests. Metal cabinets became hiding spots, but the footsteps were relentless, closing in fast. Cairo tripped over a fallen box, yelping softly as Zion yanked him back to his feet. Malik's eyes scanned for an exit. Dead end. They were trapped. 2 men appeared at the corridor's mouth, their faces devoid of emotion. One pulled out a baton, its tip crackling with electricity. Micah whimpered, his grip tightening on Malik's fingers. It's over, kids. The man sneered, stepping closer. Malik stepped in front of his brothers, fists bold, his young frame trembling but defiant. He wouldn't let them touch his family, not while he could still stand. A sudden blur streaked past Malik's vision. One of the men grunted as a powerful arm cloth landed him to the ground. The other turned, but a fist struck his gut, folding him over. Both bodies crumpled, unconscious before the boys could process what had happened. Standing over them was a man built like a fortress, his dark coat flaring as he turned. His face was carved in hard lines, but his eyes softened the moment they landed on the brothers. Your father always said you'd be stubborn like him, the man said. Malik's mouth was dry. Who are you? The man crouched, speaking low and calm. Name's Langston, your father's old shadow. I was never far from you, Malik. I promised him I'd be there when the jackals came sniffing. Malik's guard didn't drop immediately. You with them, with Jeremiah and Calvin. Langston's eyes darkened. Not in this life, not in the next. He stood, offering Malik his hand. I don't work for thieves. I work for Carters. Malik hesitated, then took his hand. Langston's grip was firm, solid, like grabbing onto an anchor after drifting in a storm for too long. He looked at all 4 boys, his tone shifting from protector to mentor. Your father knew this day would come, knew those snakes would come after you. But he also knew something else. He looked Malik dead in the eye, that you'd be the one to protect them when it mattered. Malik felt the weight of those words settle in his chest. It was heavy, but it didn't crush him, it filled him. Zion exhaled slowly, Cairo's tense shoulders eased, and Micah, still clutching Malik's side, looked up with innocent trust. You've done good so far, Langston said, stepping back, but from now on, you're not fighting alone. You lead. I follow. Malik nodded. There were no speeches, no declarations, just a silent understanding between them now. Langston glanced at the unconscious bodies on the floor. We'd better move. Those were just the opening act. The main show's coming. As they slipped back into the alleyways, their pace quickened, but for the first time since they were thrown out, they weren't running scared. They were moving with purpose. The Carter brothers had found an ally, and the battle for their father's legacy had just begun. The old boxing gym stood like a ghost at the edge of the city. Its sign was barely legible now, the words Carter's Gym, hidden beneath layers of peeling paint and grime. To the world, it was just another abandoned building, but to the Carter boys, it was their father's heart. This was where Ezekiel Carter had learned to fight. Not for titles or belts, but for respect, for dignity, for the people the world overlooked. The boys pushed through the heavy doors, greeted by the thick scent of dust, leather and memories. Rusting lockers lined the walls. A broken speed bag hung lopsided in the corner. But in the center of the gym stood the ring, still intact. Still waiting. This was Dad's sanctuary, Zion whispered, his fingers tracing the worn ropes. Cairo circled the ring, his eyes wide. It feels like he's still here. Micah, holding his ever-present toy truck, climbed onto the ring apron, peering around as if expecting their father to step out of the shadows. Langston remained by the door watching silently. He knew this place was sacred ground. Malik paced slowly, scanning the gym. The journal had led them here, marking this as the location of the next pillar, but where there were no vaults, no obvious clues. Frustration began to build. Every second wasted felt like another step behind their enemies. We are wasting time, Malik muttered, slamming his fist against a locker. Zion flinched. We're doing our best, Malik. Well, our best isn't good enough. Malik snapped. Cairo's eyes welled with tears. We are trying, Malik. We're trying. The gym fell into a tense silence. The air between them crackled. Not with anger, but with fear, exhaustion, and the pressure of being children forced into a war. Mikami's voice wasn't here to soothe them. Their father's arms weren't here to pull them into safety. It was just them. And then Micah, oblivious to the rising tension, kicked his toy truck across the ring floor. The small plastic wheels bumped against a loose floorboard, making an odd hollow sound. Forehead snapped toward it. Zion rushed over, kneeling beside the spot. He knocked on the board, hollowed. Malik's frustration evaporated. He dropped to his knees beside Zion, prying the board loose. Beneath it was a steel box embedded into the concrete, its surface etched with the symbol of 4 interlocking circles, the same symbol from the first pillar. The boy stared in silence. Cairo was the first to speak, voice trembling. We found it. Malik's hands hovered over the box. No keyhole. Langston stepped closer, his deep voice calm. Because this isn't a lock you can pick. This one's different. Zion's eyes scanned the top of the box, noticing 4 faint indentations, 4 handprints. He murmured. Micah tilted his head. Is it for us? Malik's throat tightened. Dad wanted all of us here together. They circled the box, each placing a hand over a print. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a soft mechanical hum echoed through the gym as the box split open. Inside lay a polished silver object, a sleek device shaped like a key, but unlike any they had seen before. It glowed faintly with a blue light. Alongside it, a note, the Liberty K, only whole in unity. Malik picked it up carefully, feeling the weight of it in his palm. It wasn't heavy, but it felt important, alive even. This is it. Zion whispered. This is what they're after. Langston nodded. The Liberty Key. It's not just a vault key, it's an activation device. Without all 4 of you, it's useless to them. Your father made sure of that. For a moment, none of them spoke. The gem seemed to breathe with them, the weight of what they just unlocked settling in their hearts. But Malik couldn't ignore the bitter taste left from their earlier clash. He looked at his brothers, Zian's ever-worried brow, Cairo's glassy eyes, Maya's innocent confusion. I'm sorry, Malik said quietly, for snapping, for trying to carry this alone. Cairo didn't wait. He wrapped his arms around Malik's waist, burying his face into his chest. We are with you, Zion said, placing a hand on Malik's shoulder. Micah simply smiled, holding up his toy truck as if offering his own kind of alliance. Malik crouched, pulling them all into a hug. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't pretty, but it was them. Langston watched silently, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Ezekiel had been right. Unity wasn't just a lesson. It was their weapon. The Carter brothers had just found their edge. They stood together now, not as scared kids, but as a unit. And with the Liberty K in hand, the final phase of their journey had begun. The Carter family had always carried themselves with quiet dignity, but the world wasn't interested in dignity now. It wanted a spectacle. Naomi sat on the edge of a motel bed, her head in her hands as the TV played another brutal segment. Jeremiah and Calvin's smear campaign was working. The headline screamed across every channel. Carter Empire in shambles. Widow Naomi Carter's reckless spending exposed. Where are the Carter boys? Sources claimed they're homeless and wandering. Family fortune lost to widow's mental breakdown. Each word was a blade, each sentence a deliberate wound. The walls of the cheap motel felt like they were closing in. Ezekiel was gone. The world was mocking them. Her sons, just children, were being hunted, and no matter how hard she tried, it felt like she was failing them all. I can't do this, Naomi whispered, her voice breaking, across the room. Malik sat in the corner, his jaw tight, watching his mother sink deeper into despair. Zion was pacing, anxious and restless. Cairo sat on the bed, hugging his knees, while Micah played quietly with his toy truck, unaware of the storm swirling around him. Malik had never seen his mother like this. Not even at the funeral. She was the one who was supposed to be unshakable. But now she looked tired, fragile, like the world had taken too much and left her hollow. I've tried to stay strong for you boys, Naomi said, lifting her tear-streaked face. But maybe your uncles were right. Maybe we're not cut out for this fight. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then Malik stood. He didn't shout. He didn't pace. He just walked to his mother, knelt in front of her, and gently took her hands. Mom, Malik said softly but firmly. They can't break us, you hear me? They can smear your name on television. They can steal our house. They can send their men after us. But they'll never be able to take away what Dad gave us. Nakame's lips trembled. They already took everything, Malik. Malik shook his head. No, they took things. Money, walls, cars. But what Dad gave us is still here. He pointed to his chest, to me, to Zion, to Cairo, to Micah. They can't touch that. Zion stopped pacing, stepping beside Malik. We're not done yet, Mom. Cairo wiped his nose, standing tall despite the quiver in his voice. You always say, Carter, blood doesn't run, it fights. Micah looked up, smiling innocently. We are going to win, Mommy. I know it. Nakame's breath hitched as she looked at her son, small, worn, but unbroken. Her heart cracked open. She had been so focused on protecting them. She didn't realize they were protecting her, too. The weight began to lift. She reached out, pulling all four into a tight embrace, tears streaming freely now, not of defeat, but of release. As they sat there, tangled in each other's arms, Langston entered the room quietly, a brown envelope in his hand. You might want to see this, he said, placing it gently on the table. Naomi looked up, her eyes red but alert. Langston explained, your husband wasn't a fool. He knew what his brothers would try. Before he passed, he filed documents with a private legal firm. It took me time to retrieve them, but here they are. With trembling hands, Naomi opened the envelope. Inside were copies of Ezekiel's final will, trust documents, and most damning of all, financial ledgers showing Jeremiah and Calvin's embezzlement schemes. Complete with signatures, bank records, and hidden transactions, the paper trail was ironclad. Nakame's eyes widened as the pieces snapped into place. They lied. She breathed. They lied to everyone. To the courts, to the media. To me. Malik's lips curved into a slow, determined smile. And now we've got them. The despair that had nearly consumed Naomi was replaced by a new fire. The Carters weren't victims. They were survivors. And now they had the truth. The elevator hummed as it descended into the earth, deeper than any parking garage. Deeper than any subway line. The walls were lined with brushed steel, reflecting the anxious faces of the Carter family as they stood shoulder to shoulder. Malik's hand gripped the Liberty key tightly, its cool metal humming with an energy that none of them fully understood. Naomi stood silently behind her boys, her heart pounding, watching them stand taller than their years. When the elevator doors opened, it felt like stepping into the future. The vault wasn't a room, it was a fortress. Glass panels shimmered with interactive screens. The air felt colder, cleaner. Every surface was sleek, untouched by time. At the far end stood a singular control pedestal waiting for them. Langston was already there, fingers dancing across a holographic interface. All right, he said, voice echoing slightly. This is it, the Liberty Vault. Your father built this place in secret. Not even the board knew it existed. Malik stepped forward, his brothers closed behind. What do we do? Zion asked, eyes scanning the room. Langston pointed to the pedestal. The Liberty key is coded to your fingerprints, all four of you. One alone won't unlock it. That was Ezekiel's insurance. He made sure this legacy could only be opened if you stood together. Malik's chest swelled with the weight of it. He looked at Cairo, Zion, and little Micah. No more running, no more hiding. He placed the Liberty key into the console. It lit up, projecting four circular handprints into the air. Malik nodded once. Let's finish this. One by one, they raised their hands. Malik's hand hovered over the first imprint. Zion took the second. Cairo's small fingers trembled as he reached for the third. Micah, barely tall enough, reached up to the last. As their hands pressed into the projections, the vault responded. A deep resonant hum filled the room. Lights cascaded across the walls as the pedestal sank into the floor, revealing a hidden chamber. The walls unfolded like petals, revealing shelves of meticulously arranged documents, digital drives, and at the heart of it all, an enormous holographic ledger displaying a figure so large it seemed unreal. $100 billion, Naomi gasped softly, her hand covering her mouth. This wasn't just their family's fortune, it was untouched. Untouched because their uncles couldn't access it. Ezekiel had made sure of that. Langston smiled faintly. It's yours. Every cent, deeds to every property, shares to every company. But more importantly, he gestured to a series of folders labeled community initiatives, schools, hospitals, innovation centers, Ezekiel's blueprint for rebuilding the city, not just for profit, but for people. Malik stepped closer, his fingers brushing over the names. This was their father's real legacy. The lights dimmed and a soft chime echoed through the vault. A projection flickered to life. Ezekiel's face appeared clear, strong, timeless. If you're seeing this, it means you stood together. That's all I ever wanted. They tried to teach you to take. I taught you to build. Wealth isn't just dollars. It's what you leave behind when your name fades. Sons, this is not the end of your fight. This is the start of your mission. Build something bigger than yourself, bigger than me. And when the world asks you who you are, you look them in the eye and say, we are Carters. We build. The hologram faded. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Malik exhaled slowly. He left us everything we need. Zayn's lips curled into a determined smile. Now it's our turn. Cairo wiped his eyes. They're not ready for us. Micah, clutching Malik's hand, looked up with a grin. We are going to fix it, right? Malik knelt, placing a hand on Maya's shoulder. We are going to fix everything. Naomi stood back, watching her sons, not as boys, but as heirs, stepping into a destiny that was bigger than greed, bigger than money. It wasn't about taking back what was stolen. It was about building what no one else could. The Carter family was ready, and the world was about to remember their name. The Carter brothers had never stood in front of so many cameras. The press conference was held at the Liberty Community Center, one of Ezekiel Carter's unfinished dreams. It was no grand hall. The floors were bare concrete, the walls half-painted. But today it was the perfect stage. Dozens of journalists, bloggers, and live streamers packed the room. Social media had already begun buzzing hours before. The world was curious. The narrative had been fed carefully by Jeremiah and Calvin for weeks. A fallen billionaire family, a widow gone mad, 4 boys lost to the streets. But the Carters had a different story to tell. Naomi stood to the side. Her sons lined up in front of the podium. Malik wore a simple black hoodie. Zian's hands trembled, but his gaze was sharp. Cairo stood with quiet defiance, arms crossed. Micah clung to Malik's hand, his small smile belying the storm about to unfold. Langston was nearby, arms crossed, ensuring no one dared interfere. The murmurs died down as Malik stepped to the microphone. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Good afternoon. My name is Malik Carter. My brothers and I were thrown out of our home 3 weeks ago. They said we were broke. They said my mother was unstable. They said we had nothing left, but they were wronged. He stepped back. Turning to Zion, the quietest Carter took a breath and stepped forward. I'm not a speaker, Zion began, his voice soft but firm. But I'm good with numbers and facts, so let's talk about facts. He pulled a small device from his pocket. A nearby screen lit up, projecting documents. Bank statements, signed contracts. These are the real numbers. Over $300 million siphoned from Lancaster Holdings by Jeremiah and Calvin Carter. Fake debt shell companies. Illegal asset transfers. While they told the world my mother was unstable, they were covering their tracks. The room buzzed as reporters leaned forward, snapping photos of the projected evidence. Zion continued, his confidence growing. These are not accusations. They are facts. Certified documents, bank trails, and a video confession from one of their own accountants admitting to years of embezzlement. The room exploded with questions, but Zion raised his hand, silencing them. You wanted to know where the Carter boys went. We were busy finding the truth. Not just for us, but for everyone our father fought for. Behind them, the screen shifted to a montage of Ezekiel's community projects. The schools, the hospitals, the families he had uplifted. Cairo stepped forward, his young voice slicing through the noise. We're not here to take back a company. We are here to finish what our dad started. The weight of his words hung heavy. The narrative began to crumble. Reporters who once parroted headlines about a disgraced widow now scribbled notes furiously. Live streams exploded with comments, people demanding justice, people sharing clips, people rallying behind the story of the thrown-out billionaire boys. Then, as if scripted by fate, a reporter asked, what happens to Jeremiah and Calvin Carter now? Langston's lips curled into a knowing smile as at that very moment the side doors opened and federal agents walked in. Jeremiah and Calvin, dressed in tailored suits, were escorted in handcuffs, their faces caught between rage and disbelief. Micah, clutching Malik's hand, leaned toward the microphone, his voice innocent yet cutting. They lied. They got caught. That's what happens. The room erupted. Malik didn't need to say another word. Neither did Naomi. The truth had spoken for them. By nightfall, every headline would tell a different story. Not about a fallen family, but about 4 brothers who stood back up. The Carter name had been restored, but more importantly, their father's legacy had been reclaimed. And this was just the beginning. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a golden glow over the neighborhood where it all began. The streets, once forgotten by the city, were alive with movement. Families gathered on sidewalks. Kids pressed their faces against the gates, eyes wide with curiosity. Camera crews were present, but they weren't the center of attention. Not today. Today, all eyes were on the Carter brothers, standing at the entrance of the newly completed Ezekiel Carter Youth Innovation Center. Malik, Zion, Cairo, and Micah stood side by side, dressed not in suits, but in simple shirts bearing their father's name. The building behind them was more than bricks and glass. It was a promise fulfilled. Where once there had been an abandoned lot, now stood a center filled with classrooms, creative studios, tech labs, and community spaces. It wasn't just for show, it was for the people their father had always fought for. Naomi stood a few steps behind her sons, her heart swelling with a pride so deep it ached. She watched as Malik, now carrying himself with a calm strength, surveyed the crowd with steady eyes. Zion adjusted his glasses, double-checking the event's schedule on his tablet. Ever the planner, Cairo was chatting with some of the kids, showing them around, already taking on the role of a mentor. And Micah was just being Micah. As the ribbon ceremony approached, Micah tugged at Malik's hand. Big bro, he said, his voice small but certain. Malik looked down, kneeling to Maya's level. We did it, didn't we? Malik's throat tightened. He smiled, pulling his little brother into a hug. Yeah, buddy, we did it. The crowd hushed as Naomi stepped forward, scissors in hand, but she didn't move toward the ribbon. She handed them to Malik. This was never mine to cut, she said, her voice clear. It's yours. Malik looked at his brothers. They didn't need to speak. They knew they had been thrown out with nothing, lied to, betrayed, chased, but standing here in the heart of their father's dream, none of that mattered anymore. They took the scissors together, each placing a hand on it. As the ribbon was cut, cheers erupted. It wasn't about wealth. It wasn't about revenge. It was about proving that unity, not greed, was the true legacy Ezekiel Carter had left behind. Cameras flashed, but the family barely noticed, because at that moment, they weren't thinking about headlines or bank accounts. They were thinking about the lives that would walk through those doors tomorrow. Kids who'd be given opportunities, hope, and a future, all because four brothers decided to stand together when the world tried to tear them apart. As the crowd surged forward, Malik felt Micah slip his hand into his again. We are builders now, right? Mike asked. Malik smiled. That's right. Just like Dad said, the Carter family stood as one, the legacy no longer a weight, but a foundation, and this was only the beginning.